Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. Do not adjust your headsets or whatever video platform you are on. We are back after a week away, during which time Dennis got to visit California. I worked pretty much every day. And Matt, who will be joining us here in a little bit, I'm pretty sure he went to 10,000 soccer practices. But
10,000 soccer practices and had a leg amputated, right?
Yeah, hopefully his knee's doing a little bit better. You know, age comes for all of us. My knees felt that way after it was one of our biggest weeks for work. And the way I described it to my wife is I got Disneyland visit level steps without the Disneyland experience. You probably had more fun on your week off. So how are you doing? Adjusting back to work week?
I'm about a week away from being caught up from missing a week. So, it's just lots of stuff going on. I mean, the job's great. Baseball practices started up. Cole started basketball conditioning for the 7th grade basketball team today. He said he had a great time, and we'll see. There were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders there, so we'll see if he can hold up. There's going to be pressure. He said that about 30 kids, and I'm like, man, 30 kids don't make the middle school team. It's time for you to start stepping it up. So, but he got a new baseball bat yesterday. I got to say, they're a lot more expensive than when I was a kid. A lot more expensive. I mean,
everything's more expensive than when we were kids.
We talked him down from the $400 one.
I mean, I don't know how people justified doing real eggs for Easter egg hunts this year, because it's like this is gonna make us really old, but it's like $7.81 for 18 eggs. I remember that used to be like a couple bucks, and right. That was just like 6 months ago.
Well, I mean, he needed a bat because he's a big kid, and he needed a bat that suited his size. So we got him a 33-inch, 30-ounce bat. And it's a fairly heavy bat. And he went out to practice last night and was clubbing him into the outfield. So I'm like, all right, it was a good decision. I mean, we spent 12 years going to Play It Again Sports, not a sponsor, and buying and trading in sports equipment. And so we had over $100 in store credit on file. So that was beneficial. That it was a 25% off the bat. The one he wanted, they had a couple others from the same company that were the same bat, just a couple years older, and they were new. And so we made him go outside, blindfolded him, and had him swing him. And when he couldn't tell the difference, we said, yeah, man, you're getting the cheap one.
Matt, how is the knee? Are you in the recovery process?
Yeah, I'm good. I got a doctor's appointment done and everything. It looks like missed any major structural damage, which is obviously good news. Got an MRI scheduled next week. They said at worst probably just a slight meniscus tear. So good to go. Ready to
what a fun time, though.
Get back and playing soft. Get ready to get back out there playing softball now next Friday. On a bye week this week. Perfect time to heal up, and we'll wear a brace and get right back at it.
Okay.
So you got to play catcher.
Ah, hell no. I'll be back out in center field. I'll be good to go. That's what the brace is for. It's mechanical. It's got all the great metal stuff on the side for great stability and help keep the knee stable. Be good to go.
I honestly don't know why in a competitive adult softball league you think playing catcher would be safer, Dennis, because sometimes
they
those
really don't
guys
do much.
As
collide.
long as it's not like that Bryce
Nah,
George
no.
and burn after reading.
Most people won't collide or anything with the catcher. The catcher is by far the easiest spot out there. They just stand there, maybe a tag here and there. It's pretty safe, but
Well, let's move on. We have a little bit of news, and then I'm going to grill you guys about your rookie wide receiver and tight end rankings as we head into the draft. But first, you know what? The Daniel Snyder era may almost be over. There is a new group, the Harris Group, that has put in a $6.05 billion bid, which would top the most recent record sale, which was just last, I think, October. Hasn't even been a year. Hasn't even been 8 months. That would bring new ownership to the Washington Commanders. Matt, what would it mean to move on from the Dan Snyder era for the NFL and for us as fantasy players?
I mean, from the fantasy side of things, I don't know what to think. This owner, the ownership group or the main name there, Josh Harris, owns a lot of different teams, and none of which I believe are fairly successful. So
Doesn't he have the Philadelphia 76ers?
yeah, I mean, they've made the playoffs a couple times, but they're not. They're the what's the term that they kind of coined and trust the
Process.
process, which hasn't worked out. They built around Ben Simmons, who ended up not doing anything and got traded. They've made the playoffs, but I don't believe they've made it past round one. I want to say the Devils have been somewhat good. I know Chris Moxley over at C2C. He's a big Devils fan, but I don't think they've gotten that far. Crystal Palace, the Premier League team that he owns, they're a middle of the table team. So which I feel like Washington probably will be, is like a middle of the table NFL team. I think it's definitely good to get away from Daniel Snyder with everything that he was doing and just kind of all the bad things we heard about what that team was doing and the what was the word, the sexual misconduct stuff that's been alleged and all that. Like, it's great to get him out. New ownership will be good there, but what it means for the team, I don't know. They've been such a dysfunctional franchise for so long. I can't see any reason why it won't be a positive thing to get out from the Daniel Snyder ownership and move on to something new. They've got interesting pieces to build around in, Terry McLaurin. You've got God, why is his name jumping out of my head? Jahan Dotson. I wanted to say Jaron Hall, who is the BYU quarterback in the draft this year. I could not for life of me think of his name. Jahan Dotson, they've got Chase Young, but he hasn't really been healthy. They don't have a quarterback. So maybe they make a move up in the draft to get a quarterback.
What are you talking about?
Well, I don't know that he's the franchise guy, but hey, I'm happy for the Commanders. There was definitely a lot of fans that were saying they would not be fans of the team anymore until Daniel Snyder was gone. So from someone who's loved a dysfunctional franchise in the Cleveland Browns and myself, and happy to see them be a little bit better over the past couple years. Like, I'm happy for Commanders fans to see him out, and they can kind of now come back and be fans of their team again.
Peter popping in there, he said he would take the football version of the 76ers as the Commanders right now. Philadelphia 76ers with Coach Doc Rivers are the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs.
How much I do not watch much basketball. I watch the playoffs. I do not watch any of it in the regular season. How much you want to make a bet they're out in the first round this year?
They're playing Brooklyn. I think they'll cream Brooklyn.
We'll see. Kevin Durant's still on. No.
Brooklyn sold all their assets.
That's right. Okay, how much you want to make a bet they get knocked out in the second round? Then they won't make it to the third.
They'll play Boston, so probably.
I just want to know, am I going to be able to get that kind of ROI on my fantasy teams when I sell them?
I know they said Daniel Snyder bought him for $800 million, and now can sell him for $6.05 billion.
So,
I think, dude. So the other thing that strikes me, we all thought Ron Rivera was probably safe because of the ownership situation, but I think he's officially on the hot seat.
I think he's gone. It's funny. I saw this on Twitter this morning when they were talking about him selling it for $6 billion. Someone came in and corrected it and said that, well, he's actually only going to get $2 billion back altogether. I was like, oh, okay.
Only.
My bad.
Yeah.
You know, I could
Only
make 2 billion work
That's
for me.
with a B, people, not an M. A B. Yeah.
I mean, I
Daniel
can make
Snyder.
2 million work for me.
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
I'm right there. I can make 200,000 work for me. Just let's figure this out here, people. Not that big a deal, or it is a big deal.
Dennis, the other big piece of news probably is Odell Beckham Jr. finally signs a 1-year deal with the Ravens. Says he was offered no guarantee that Lamar Jackson will be there. What do you think of the signing, and what do you think it means for the Ravens?
I mean, he's going to be a decent number 3 receiver for them behind Andrews and somebody else. I mean, he's 31 years old. He's had 2 ACL injuries on the same knee. I mean, we're chasing the ghost. He's turning into Josh Gordon. And I mean, I don't roster a single share across 20 teams. I'm not looking to acquire. I don't know. Can he be good? I think he can for stretches. He's turning into, Deshaun Jackson almost. He's going to have some blow up games, but that offense is still going to run through Mark Andrews. It's still going to run through Lamar Jackson. And I don't know. I need to see him stay healthy now at this stage. And at 31 years old, it could be a fit. I don't know that he's got the same dynamic ability after 2 severe knee injuries. So
Peter's really upset because he just traded you Bateman. You didn't even give him credit as the wide
well,
receiver.
Bateman's coming back from an injury. Bateman will get it next year.
The 3 games he's in there, he probably will be wide receiver 2 for them.
So I mean, it's one of those cases where if I'm going to acquire him, it's going to be such a low draft pick that I'd be willing to give up for him for fantasy. I hope he does well. I don't want to see. I'm not looking to see players fail. I don't want him to get injured. But it seems odd that, he's not really a possession receiver. Lamar throws better over the middle of the field. He can do some other things. Lamar likes to run it or does run it. They got J.K. Dobbins. They're a run-heavy team. We've seen, I think, better receivers career, i.e. Marquise Brown. And so Odell is, I don't think, ever been known to be that guy that's, hey, I'm good just being a guy. And especially if they start, I don't think he's, going to be a big benefit to the locker room. So, I hope he succeeds, but I don't know if it's a great fit or not.
I'm a little bit more bullish on him just based on what you can probably. I would think you could get him for a third or maybe a. I don't know that I'd trade a second for him, but last time he was in Todd Monken's offense was his best year in Cleveland. He had over 1,000 yards. I believe it was 9 touchdowns. Him and Jarvis Landry both actually had incredible seasons. Jarvis Landry also had over 1,000 yards. I think we're going to, assuming Lamar comes back, which I think is still a very big question mark right now. It seems like, Odell says, I'd love to play with them. And there are, someone just came out recently, an NFL player, and was doing a podcast interview talking about how he's hearing rumors that there's a lot more players now heading to Baltimore. So maybe Lamar is just on his way back there. But Dennis mentioned, the offense is definitely going through Andrews. I don't think any of us question that. But I don't know that I've seen enough from Bateman to just assume he's going to be the 2. And if Odell, and this is a big if Odell can stay healthy, I think he can be the number 1 wide receiver in the offense, the number 2 option. We've seen how special he can be if he stays healthy. He was good for the Rams in the back half of that season. And, I know he hasn't put it all together. It was a bad year in Cleveland before that. Gets traded to the Rams. looked like he was going to set records in that Super Bowl with how often they were targeting him, how good he looked until he got hurt. If he can stay healthy, like I'm not coming out here and tell you he's going to be a wide receiver 1, probably not even a wide receiver 2. But I think he can be a consistent option for them because Monken knows him. I think that's why he signed in Baltimore, to be honest with you. They have the connection, and we've just seen how good that offense can be 1 year in Cleveland. And I know it's a little bit of a different game, but 2 years in Georgia being for the Georgia Bulldogs, an offense that's not known being good, to lead them to 2 national championships and making Stetson Bennett look like an actual quarterback, a good quarterback in college football. I just wouldn't sell him short. There's definitely a lot of ifs, but as Dennis mentioned, what you have to pay for him, I don't think it's a bad bet. Because if you can throw a 3rd-round pick and get him, I think he can be a wide receiver 3 for you for at least a year or 2 if he stays healthy. That's not a bad bet. This we're about to talk about it. It's a good draft class when it comes to depth, but not a lot of guys in like the 3rd round I'm willing to bet on. I think I'd rather take the bet on Odell with a 3rd-round pick than a rookie.
So the other piece of news, former number 3 overall pick Jeff Okudah traded to the Atlanta Falcons. They also signed Bud Dupree. Matt, do you like the moves? Do you like what Atlanta's doing this offseason?
I like the move if Okudah is healthy and can bounce back. Obviously, the torn Achilles, I don't remember him doing much last year. I don't know if that's something like Dennis can let me know how good he did or didn't do, because I honestly don't remember. But I think that it gives him a pretty good secondary now. If he can bounce back to, people forget because he's been injured. He was, what was that, number 3 pick overall by Detroit? I know he's top 6. He was, in my opinion, one of the better members of that.
Number 3.
Okay. One of the better members of that secondary. He had a play that should have been a strip fumble recovery against Clemson that would have sent Ohio State on to the national championship that year. Like, in my opinion, he's a very, very good player. It's just how well is he healing up from that Achilles? There were rumors that he wasn't really fitting in the locker room there with Detroit. But overall, I think, at least in my opinion, that gives them a very good secondary overall now, adding him in there. So I like it. Baltimore. Atlanta's biggest thing was defense. So you add a guy like that, a former 1st-round pick who, if he's healthy, can be really good. I love it. I'm all in on it.
Yeah, I think he's kind of, after the Achilles injury, it seems like he may be starting to get pushed towards the safety position or a Pete Carroll type of defense where you don't need to have super fast corners. He did play better last season. Some of his issues have been confidence. Some of it have been the injury, and maybe confidence suffered because of the injuries. But he's 6'1" and 205. He's got the size to play safety. I don't know that he's got I don't know that he's got that dog in him to play safety. There's definitely some guys that get it, like Troy Polamalu, and some guys that just don't. Speaking of safeties, Budda Baker just requested a trade, according to Ian Rappaport. But I like what the Falcons, honestly, they seem like they may be setting up for a Caleb Williams run if they don't grab one of the quarterbacks in this draft. They're bringing in players like Bud Dupree, who's an okay player. He's a journeyman type of guy. They're adding some more pieces, but I don't know that they're building up so far that they're gonna put themselves out of position to be able to get a Caleb Williams or a Drake May next year. I don't know. Maybe Desmond Ridder takes hold of that job and runs with it. And with Drake London and Kyle Pitts, they've got a couple weapons. Their biggest weaknesses are offensive line, defensive line. I don't hate it for the price they paid, a 5th rounder. I do think Okudah will be considered a bust in Detroit, but that doesn't mean he can't go on and have, a 7 or 8 year career going forward as a defensive back. I mean, Eli Apple has been playing well enough to maintain a starting job in the NFL, and he's highly disregarded.
Yeah, wasn't the original team that drafted him the Giants?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
in the
yeah. let's move to some guys who might want to hear their names called on opening night of the draft, which is now just 13 days away. Kicks off not next Thursday, but the Thursday after. So 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be just about kicking back, enjoying rounds 2 and 3, where some of these guys are definitely going to get drafted. Looking at rookie wide receivers, wide receivers. Apparently, I'm watching too much Star Wars. Mandalorian's back. You gotta do what you love. Dennis, I'll start with you. Who is your number one right now, and are they in a tier by themselves for you? If not, who else would be in that tier?
Yeah, I've got my guys broken out into tiers, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is my tier one. I mean, there's definitely separation between him and the next set of guys. He's the number one in this class. If he was in last year's class, I don't think he'd be the number one. He's got a lot of talent. He gets open. He's not the fastest, but he's fast enough. I think 4.5 is basically what he ran. But he's very quick, had a super fast 3-cone. He just gets open. He's going to make a lot of plays. Is he a guy that's going to outrun a lot of the defensive backs for 90-yard touchdowns? No, but 50-yarders he's going to be able to pull off. And he's quick enough to get some initial separation and pull away. He's got great hands. Probably end up in the slot, but he can play outside. So it's not like he'll come off the field in 2 wide receiver sets. He's definitely going to be a guy in that Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra, St. Brown spectrum, somewhere in there. Not quite as fast as Amon-Ra, not as slow as Keenan Allen, but they all get open with route running and top of stem quickness. I think he's probably a top 5, top 6 draft pick in Superflex, top 3 in 1 QB drafts.
Yeah, my tier one is also just Jackson Smith and Jigba. Now I know that you're expecting a lot from him. He likely is I shouldn't say only. He's likely going to be mainly in the slot at the NFL level. We haven't seen him play outside for Ohio State. I still believe that he can, but I do think he profiles to be more of a slot wide receiver. So you're hoping that he ends up on like the Cooper Kupp spectrum of just getting targeted a lot. The one thing I do think that gives him a little bit of a separation over the other two is that he can separate anywhere. He can separate off the line. He can separate within route. And I do believe he can separate at the catch point as well. And he's just got incredible footwork, incredible hands. He's a very smart player as well. He knows when to attack the holes in defenses and where those holes will be. So wherever he ends up, I think he's going to be a very good wide receiver for you. He doesn't have the highest ceiling of the top 3 wide receivers, but I do think he has the safest floor of the 3. He likely, in my opinion, will more often than not probably be a wide receiver 2 for you in fantasy, depending on landing spot. But I expect him to be drafted likely in the top 10 of the NFL draft, and I think he's going to be a very good wide receiver for his career.
Okay, well, moving on from number one, who would be the guys in your next tier, Matt?
So in my next tier, it is just 2 players, and it is Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison. Both those guys have some holes in their game, but they also have, upside and floors. Jordan Addison, I think, goes right up there with JSN and has a very safe floor, but I do think his upside is capped. Not the fastest guy, but he is an incredible route runner. And he is also a guy that I would say is extremely good at separating within the route. If you want to compare him to somebody in the NFL, he reminds me a lot of Devonta Smith. The difference is I don't think he can take the top off a defense like Devonta Smith can. The other guy in my tier 2 is Quentin Johnston. Struggles sometimes with concentration drops, doesn't have the most expansive route tree. If you wanted to compare him to somebody coming out, he does not have the explosiveness, the build, or really the upside. So you're talking about the Dollar General version of this player, and that's DK Metcalf. if he ends up in the right offense that uses him in the ways that he succeeded in college, I do think Quentin Johnson can be good for you. And I do think if he figures it all out, he is the one out of these three that can be a consistent wide receiver one, because he's got the size and he's got the speed, but he's not there yet. And I do think you're going to have to give him time. That doesn't mean he can't produce. We saw DK landed in Seattle and they were like, hey, we know that you're really only good with slants and go routes. That's what we're going to have you do as a rookie. And he succeeded. I don't believe he finishes a wide receiver one, but he was a high-end wide receiver two as a rookie. I think Quentin Johnson can be that, but the team has to lean into that and slowly develop him like Seattle did for DK. So I hope he gets that opportunity. If he ends up in, say, a Chargers offense and they're like, we expect you to be outside by Mike Williams right off the bat, and we're moving Keenan Allen into the slot, I don't know that Quentin Johnson succeeds right away, but he does have the upside of a top wide receiver.
In my next tier, I have Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, and Josh Downs. And this is a group of pretty small receivers that all do a lot of similar things. I think Downs probably has the best ball skills of the three of them. You know, Addison didn't test great at the combine, but when you look at the tape, I mean, he made Kenny Pickett look fantastic, and he looked great at USC. Sometimes you just play faster than you test. You know, there are guys you see out there like Evan Hull had a great combine, but when you watch the tape, he just doesn't play as fast as he tested. Addison is the opposite of that. He plays faster than he tests. Zay Flowers is another good one out of Boston College. Smaller guy again, pretty good route runner, gets open, quick. I think all three of these guys are going to end up in slot. Probably, you know, Downs is a little bit thicker than the other two, so he may get a little side work. He can handle it. And Addison is a little bit taller than the other two, and so he may get a shot to see if he can handle some of the outside work. But I expect all three of them probably to be primarily slot guys. It's a interesting dichotomy between this group and my next group.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and give us your third tier? It looks like it kicks off with a pair of teammates.
Yeah, the next group is they're most of them are the like I'm admittedly team big wide receiver, and you'll find several of those here. So I have Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Marvin Mims, Quentin Johnston, and Jonathan Mingo in my tier three. You know, Hyatt is 6 foot, but he's only 174. His production profile is a little bit concerning. Only had like 250 yards each of his first 2 seasons, and looked to be a little more of the same until Cedric Tillman got injured, and then he really took off. Tillman in 2021 had a real good year. Tillman is a little bit older, bigger guy, 6'3", 214. Tillman would be my first big wide receiver off the board if I'm drafting late first round, early second round. Marvin Mims is a guy that I've been warming up to, though. He's another guy, only 177 pounds. I got to see him sort of what kind of opportunity is he going to get at that size. You know, we've had a couple guys come out of Oklahoma that have been that size, that have been really productive in college. D.D. Westbrook immediately comes to mind, that when they got to the NFL, they just couldn't convert their skill set to an NFL skill set. There's a lot on Johnston coming into the evaluation season, and he does some things really well sometimes. The issue is that he does those same things not well way too often. He runs crossing routes and tackling. So then we'll and
Looks like Dennis froze up there for a minute. Do you want to
Yeah.
jump into your next tier?
Yeah, so my tier 3 has got a couple of the same players there. Josh Downs and Marvin Mims are the top of my tier 3, followed by Cedric Tillman. I have Kayshon Boutte there. He was in my tier 1. It's more a fear of the draft capital. And then I technically have Jalen Hyatt right here in the bottom of my tier 3. So I do like Marvin Mims. My really big thing with him is he going to end up getting the draft capital? Again, just to kind of like give you guys comparisons for those of you who don't maybe watch a lot of college football, he reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Sanders for me, who obviously had a really great career overall, specifically highlighted in Denver. Another player that he reminds me of is Santonio Holmes. So if that gives you an idea of where I think he can go for fantasy side of things. But again, a lot of that is going to come down to, can he get the volume and does he get the draft capital? Because we've really seen, despite what any of us think of these players, at the end of the day, that's what ends up mattering. If they don't get this day 1 or day 2 draft capital, just the hit rates on anybody on day 3 is very small. And I'm not betting on any of those. And unfortunately, Marvin Mims is the one in this group that I fear will not get the day 1 or day 2 draft capital. If he goes in day 3, I think you unfortunately have to fade him, regardless of how good I possibly think he can be. Zay Flowers and Josh Downs are up the top. I agree with kind of what Dennis said. They both profiled to be slot wide receivers. I'm higher on Josh Downs than I am Zay Flowers. Josh Downs, because of his speed and quickness with in route, is really good. I like Zay a lot. He's tended to not show up, though, at times when they're playing really good secondaries, and I just don't know that I think he's – my fear with him is I've seen a lot of people comping him to Antonio Brown, and mostly in the Twitter sphere, and I just don't think that's a good thing to do to Zay. I don't think that's there. I don't think he's Antonio Brown. I don't think he's anywhere close to that. And I don't think it's smart to compare people to Hall of Famers, which is what you're doing, regardless of what he did off the field. If you just take away what Antonio Brown did on the field minus the Buccaneers thing, like, he had a Hall of Fame career. Jalen Hyatt, well, so I'll start with Cedric Tillman, because I actually like Tillman. My big fear with him is he's kind of become this contested catch guy, which you don't necessarily see those guys really thriving in the NFL anymore. But I do think that he can. He does a very good job of separating at the catch point, much like Jamar Chase does. I'm not comparing him to Jamar Chase, but who he reminds me a lot of is Allen Robinson. And if you can get an Allen Robinson type career out of him, I mean, Allen Robinson was phenomenal having bad quarterbacks throw him the ball. Cedric Tillman's already started off on that way as well, depending on what you think of Hendon Hooker. But for Hendon Hooker, he did not have good quarterbacks at all. But I do think that he has a chance to be really good. So my fear with Jalen Hyatt, Dennis mentioned the production profile. A lot of people are boosting him up because of the year he had this year and him being a Biletnikoff Award winner. But if you go in and you look at Tennessee's offense, there's a lot of concerns for me here. Tennessee, if it comes from this Briles offense it's a Briles tree, which has guys like Kendall Wright, Terrence Williams, Corey Coleman, Denzel Mims, and there's one other player that I'm forgetting. All those names that I just mentioned should not inspire any confidence because none of them have done. Oh, it's Josh Gordon. The only one on that list that you could consider a hit and would have continued to be a hit had, unfortunately, he not dealt with the stuff off field. Every single player that I mentioned on that list, though, not one of them has done anything worth anything in the NFL. Terrence Williams is probably the next best guy, and he was at best a wide receiver 3 for you in fantasy. He was a wide receiver 2 for the Cowboys. Really good wide receiver in the NFL, but never really kind of did it for you in fantasy. Jalen Hyatt, the biggest difference for him and all those other guys played 70 to 80% outside. Jalen Hyatt played 87% of his snaps in the slot. He is a big slot wide receiver. Why does that matter? Tennessee spreads their offense out. A lot of their wide receivers are standing almost on the sidelines. They spread their offensive line out a little bit as well to spread the defense out. And what they would do is get him in motion and use stacking principles. So what that means is they would have Squirrel White or Cedric Tillman stand in front of Jalen Hyatt. And when Hendon Hooker would say snap, hut, whatever, that first wide receiver would go and cause conflict and get not the aggression is not the word, the contact with that defensive back at the line of scrimmage, which then allowed Jalen Hyatt a free release. Jalen Hyatt, a very fast wide receiver, is now coming into conflict with the safeties, who are more than often flat-footed, while Jalen Hyatt has already hit full speed, which you saw have a massive amount of success this year, including against Alabama, which is where I think people are propping up Jalen Hyatt a lot more than they should. I am not telling you that Jalen Hyatt cannot be a good wide receiver. I think he can be. Do not expect him, if he goes in the first round, which all the rumors are saying he will, to be a guy that will produce for you this year. He is still a very raw wide receiver. I'm not saying he can't get there. He can, possibly. But he is a guy who has as well as Quentin Johnson I mentioned earlier, a very limited, and I mean limited route tree, and has not played physically against defensive backs at all in college. And I would not expect with his frame and him never doing it to just come in and do it in the NFL. So Jalen Hyatt is a guy that personally I'm fading based on cost, because if you're taking him in the first round, I think you have to wait. I think he's more on the old school wide receiver trajectory on your waiting 2 to 3 years before you actually see return on Jalen Hyatt, compared to everybody expecting him to be a year one guy because he likely gets drafted in round one.
So would you take Tillman over Hyatt if
I
you're faced
would,
with the two of them?
yes, personally.
So would I. I have them in the same tier, but they're kind of on opposite ends of the tier.
So if I'm counting correctly, through 3 tiers of receivers, each of you have 9 guys.
Let me double check. That sounds
That's what
right,
it looks
though.
like.
So Dennis, why don't you give yours 1 to 9, and then Matt can give his in order.
All right, so I have in tier 1, I've got Jackson Smith and Jigba. Tier 2, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, and Josh Downs. Tier 3, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Marvin Mims, Quentin Johnston, and Jonathan Mingo.
In my tier 1 is JSN. In my tier 2, it is Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnston. In my tier 3, it is Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, Kayshon Boutte, Marvin Mims, Cedric Tillman, and Jalen Hyatt.
All right. So Matt, why don't you go ahead and give us your tier 4 guys?
So I'm going to be honest, my tier 4 is pretty much everybody else. The top of that tier is Raheem Jarrett, but you're betting solely on upside and him being able to figure it out from a overall play standpoint. So I mean, this is a guy, 5-star wide receiver coming out of high school. He's got all the athleticism in the world. He just wasn't able to put it together on the field. A lot of that, I think, was probably Maryland's offense. He's the one that I would bet on being able to figure it out, just because he is really good. He is Rashad Bateman with more speed for me. That's the kind of the way that I view him. Outside of him, I mean, Jaden Reed's interesting. Parker Washington, Trey Palmer, Jonathan Mingo, Puka Nacua, A.T. Perry, Nathaniel Dell, Chuck Sizzle, Charlie Jones. My thing with all these guys in tier 4, I just want to see what the draft capital is. Landing spot, that'll be how I determine how I'll be drafting them in the NFL or in my rookie drafts. Because again, these guys are all in tier 4 because I just don't think any of them really get day 2 draft capital. And at the end of the day, just if you look at the hit, or I'm not a big analytical guy. I mostly rely on film. But if you go look at the analytics on this stuff, wide receivers who don't get day 1 or day 2 draft capital just don't ever really hit in the NFL. It is a very, very small window. And I'm not going to chase, I believe it's 7% of those guys end up panning out. I'm not chasing the 7%. At that point, I'm going to pivot to running backs and tight ends and just try and get those wide receivers who are drafted day 1 or day 2. So I like all these guys. Each one of these guys have different profiles that I really like, but at the end of the day, it's going to depend on what their draft capital is.
Yeah, I think this is where it does start to break down, who's going to have the best path to touches, the best opportunity. I have in my next tier, I've got Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, Kayshon Boutte, and Trey Palmer. Like Rashee Rice and Quentin Johnston were involved in a Freaky Friday accident, is my contention, because Quentin Johnston at 6'3" and 210 pounds or whatever plays like a 6 foot 200-pound Rashee Rice, and Rice at 6', 200 plays like he's 6'3" and 210 pounds, and it kind of it hampers Rice. He's used to playing against some of these lesser school and lesser defensive backs and putting up numbers and being able to outmuscle them. He's not going to be big enough to outmuscle defensive backs in the NFL, so he's going to have to go through a metamorphosis with his game. Tank Dell, I mean, I struggle calling him Tank at 5'8" and 165 pounds. You know, his game, while he's been oddly efficient in the red zone at 5'8", 165, he's going to be screwed into a slot position. He's not going to play on the outside. And so you're hoping he's going to get enough volume and maybe even enough red zone volume to be relevant. Kayshon Boutte, he went into last year as one of the top receivers in this class and has essentially spent the last 5 months looking disinterested in football. Didn't look like he really prepared for the combine. It's almost like he should have just taken this year off and said, I'm going to prepare for the NFL after putting up great tape 2 years ago, because he just doesn't seem to get it. Trey Palmer is a burner, really fast, 4.33. We're going to have to see if he can translate and bring out some other skills to go along with it. But at this point, I'm looking for a guy that has some upside. And Palmer could potentially be a guy with Deshaun Jackson type of upside with his size. He's 6 foot, I think 190 pounds, and ran a 4.33 at the combine. Will he be able to put it together to be consistent enough in the NFL is going to be the real thing for him to figure out. My stuff kind of cut out there, and so I didn't talk much about Jonathan Mingo. Mingo he's the poster boy for team big wide receiver in this class, 6'5", 220 pounds. It'll be interesting to see if he can put it together. He didn't have great quarterback play in college. He didn't have really high production at Arkansas, but he's been rising pretty fast up boards. A lot of scouts have talked about, you see comments that the NFL is higher on Mingo than Twitter is. If he gets round 2 draft capital, I think that's going to really move him.
So let me ask you guys a question about wide receivers. It's pretty well we've seen in most mock drafts, most consensus that you have Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs going kind of 1-2, especially in non-super flex leagues. After those 2 running backs, I'll start with you, Dennis. How many wide receivers would you take before you were tempted to take a Zach Charbonnet or whoever you have as running back 3?
Probably.
Do you freeze again?
Yeah, so we'll go to you first.
Probably 4. I feel comfortable taking JSN, Quentin Johnson, Addison pretty easily. Then it would come down to Josh Downs versus Zach Charbonnet for me. Zach Charbonnet is not my next running back up, but if you're talking about just like running back 3.
Well, who's your running back 3, whatever it is.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just clarifying, like looking at, my running back 3. It would probably be Downs, assuming he gets like a decent spot. Like if he ends up going to like Tampa Bay, I'd probably go running back. But Downs, it would be probably after him. I'd probably take the running back over like Zay Flowers, Kayshon Boutte, Hyatt, Tillman, those guys, because I think they're in such a bigger group like my tier 3 that like I'm comfortable getting one of those guys later if I can.
Yeah, I'm probably only taking JSN before I dip into Charbonnet. I mean, I've got 20 teams, so I'm probably going to go Charbonnet 10 times and split the other 10 amongst Flowers, Addison, and Downs.
How many, I'll start with you, Matt. How many wide receivers do you think will end up in your top 12 overall?
3. I just can't see putting anybody else in there. For me, it would be those three: JSN, Quentin Johnson, and Jordan Addison. My thing with this class, and I shouldn't say three, I could see myself moving Downs in there, and it's just because this. So I mentioned my tier 3 of wide receivers just a minute ago. Like I would be fine taking any of those guys later in the second round because I feel like they're all in the same kind of bucket. I feel that way about the running backs, and the differences for me, the running back class is so deep. To me, there's nobody special outside of Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. Like I like Charbonnet, I like Evans, I like Tank Bigsby, I like Chase Brown. Like all these guys are in, or Kendre Miller, Devon Achane. I like all these guys, but they all fall into like similar buckets. And like I'm okay taking Josh Downs because I can get Israel Bonaconda in the third round, and there's a chance he's probably going to get at least decent draft capital. And all these guys are all an injury away that I'm fine taking whichever one's the cheapest at that point. So I could see Downs moving up in there, but it wouldn't be more than 4.
So was the question how many wide receivers go in the first round?
No, in your top 12 overall for rookies.
Oh, well, we should have known that. I had my tiers article open. I was working on. Oh, wait a minute. I do have it open. My top 12. So it's Bijan, JSN. We'll see if this article actually pulls up. I think I got maybe 4 or 5, but I don't have any tight ends in my top 12. So what? Bijan, Jackson, Smith and Jigba, Jahmyr Gibbs, Flowers, Addison, Downs, Quentin Johnston, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman are all at the back end of it in the same tier. So,
well, you mentioned tight ends. Let's go there for a minute. Dennis, give me your top 5 tight ends in this class.
So Kincaid is my one. I think he's gonna. So my top tier is 3: Kincaid, Michael Mayer, and Luke Musgrave. My concern with Mayer is that he's not overly athletic, but he is a guy that I think can step into a starting tight end role, and in 11 personnel be the guy on the field, or 21 personnel he'll be the guy on the field, and so he could get plenty of opportunity because of that. Kincaid is a Mike Gesicki type kind of receiving tight end. Musgrave is the same way. They're both 6'5"-ish, 235, 240 pounds versus Mayer at 250 pounds. So I like it. Mayer, Kincaid, and Musgrave are it's like 2 Andrews and 1 Hayden Hurst in that group. And so I'm a little nervous about Mayer. In my second tier, I've got Laporta, Darnell Washington, and Luke Schoonmaker. I think Laporta comes in with a little bit of tight end university cachet. He's been productive. Schoonmaker has looked pretty good. Washington, again, is another guy like Mayer that could get caught up in the wash and end up being involved in the offensive line work an awful lot. And while he's made a couple really nice plays over the course of his career at 6'7", 265 pounds, oftentimes his catches are just kind of releasing off the line, going out 8 or 10 yards and kind of just floating down the seam, not running real crisp routes. And so I'm going to need to see more development out of Washington. I mean, he athletically seems to have the tools to develop. We'll see if coaching brings that out of him.
All right, so my top 5. This is a hard question for me to answer, honestly. So fairly easily, Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, and Darnell Washington are my top 3. Michael Mayer, just hyper productive. I know not the most athletic guy, still came in with a very high RAS score, which really seems to be the best indicator anybody has found for success at the tight end position, transitioning from college to NFL. And he did it against some of the best defenses in the, Clemson, and he was the offense at Notre Dame. Dalton Kincaid, had an amazing season with Utah. Seems like everything is cleared for him medically, which is really kind of the big concern for everybody there. Depending on where he lands, I think he can be an all-out stud. Darnell Washington is an interesting one for me. I don't disagree with what Dennis said, that he could end up blocking some because he's just so massive. Anybody who watched the combine saw him just abuse that what is that thing? The
Blocking sled.
Yeah, the blocking sled where everybody else was struggling with it. Darnell Washington picked that up like a 5-year-old, and I swear he was about to throw that thing all over the field. And what makes him so intriguing for me is that he is so big and is so athletic. I actually think the blocking side of things might help him be on the field at all times and could end up being a red zone threat. Which realistically is kind of all I want from my tight end, because there's such a small gap between, tight end 10 to 24 that if he gets you multiple touchdowns, he probably finishes as a top tight end. And I think a lot of people will fade him. I'm torn after those three between Luke Musgrave, Sam Laporta, Tucker Kraft, and Will Mallory, all of which I think are very talented. They all have very interesting things. Tucker Kraft, low-end guy. I know a lot of people may not be willing to bet on him out of South Dakota State. I actually think he has a chance. And I said earlier, I hate comparing players to Hall of Famers. I think he has a chance to be like a Travis Kelce type with what he can do as an offensive threat. We saw Daniel Bellinger have a great season this year at the most part at the end of the year for the Giants. I think Luke Musgrave, fits very well into that group. So he's a guy that I really like. A guy that I think people will fade, and he's a guy that in a lot of mocks I've been taking in the 4th round, and a guy that I would be willing to bet on is Will Mallory out of Miami. He had some injuries, didn't do much. Miami's offense really bad, but 6'5", 248, and he compares favorably to guys like Jordan Cameron, Kellen Winslow Jr., Jared Cook, Greg Olsen. Like, you list those names, and you're like, that's a very intriguing guy, and I don't think people look at Will Mallory at all because he just wasn't able to do it in college, but you've got to get that out of your head, guy. Like, Travis Kelce did nothing in college and ended up being an incredible tight end. Noah Fant, well, he was okay. Who was it? George Kittle did nothing in college and ended up being really good in the NFL. Just because they don't have college production doesn't mean they won't be good in the NFL. So Will Mallory is kind of usually jumped in to be my 5th guy. I'm going to bet on the athleticism. I think he's got really good hands, really good route runner. He's a pretty good blocker. And I just think people will fade him because he didn't do much in college and was unfortunately in a kind of a bad spot at Miami. And then Sam Laporta is right there. Like, he has a chance to be Jonnu Smith if he lands in the right offense. But realistically,
Patriots Jonnu Smith?
No, Titans Jonnu Smith. And he's an Iowa tight end, which we've just kind of come to bet on with, Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle. Like, the list of tight ends they developed is long. Realistically, after those top 3, I'm taking the cheapest one. Like, I'm taking whichever one's available in the 4th round and just betting on them because it's 4th round pick, whatever.
So you mentioned 4th round a lot. In a non-superflex, non-tight end premium rookie draft, what is the earliest you would consider taking a tight end? I'll start with you, Matt.
4th round. I'm not taking Mayer or Kincaid. The hit rate on these tight ends is just not what you'd. I mean, where were people really realistically taking TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant when they came out? Those are probably the most high profile tight ends over the past couple of years, right? People were
even the people that took Kyle Pitts is like 101.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
kind of having regret.
So all 3 of those guys were going in 1st rounds of rookie drafts based on draft cap on what we expected them to be. Now, TJ Hawkinson had a great year this year after the trade. Noah Fant's been up and down, right? Like, he's had his moments, but hasn't put it all together. I expect Kyle Pitts is going to put it together at some point, but he's also been kind of up and down. Really good rookie season, not so great last year. Why wouldn't you just bet on why wouldn't you just take a guy later? It doesn't have to be 4th. You could take him in the 3rd too, but why waste that 1st round pick? And not to say that Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid can't be good, but why use that 1st round pick on one of them when you can get a Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, or if you want to go the running back route, Zach Charbonnet, Zach Evans, Tank Bigsby, go that route and then take a Luke Musgrave, a Sam Laporta, a Will Mallory in the 3rd or 4th round. because you're likely not betting on them to do anything at that time. Give them a year or so to develop, and then if they do hit, you got your George Kittle right then. And then in the third or fourth round, where if you take Michael Mayer in the first and you're expecting him to be this next great tight end, and then he doesn't beat, you just wasted a first round pick. So if it's not tight end premium or super flex, even honestly, if it is tight end premium, I'm still taking the cheapest one because just the hit rates on tight ends is just so minimal that like I'm using my high end picks on players like the wide receivers and running backs because they'll retain their value for a long time even if they don't hit right off the bat, and trying to take a bet on a cheaper tight end later.
But you do think Mayer will go in the first round of a rookie draft?
I expect him to be a back end of the first, early second pick because he's going to likely be a top 15, I think latest 20 NFL pick, and that will likely vault him up, I think, in rookie drafts because people will want to take him because they think he's the next best thing, which I think he has a chance to be. It's just not like set in stone that he will be.
So I've developed a theory over the last couple of years that I'm just not going to draft the rookie tight ends. I mean, I'll wait a year to see how they progress. Yes, I'm going to pay a little more for them, but I know what I'm getting. I know I'm going to get somebody that has a little bit of an NFL track record that maybe looks like they're going to be able to break out or already did break out, and I just need that piece to put me over the top. So I'm willing to go pay for a productive tight end. It's just ending up that they're missing at a point. You're paying a premium for it. That being said, if there was a Kyle Pitts in this class, I would draft him. But that's the exception. I'm going to go with guys like that. I'm not going to, I'm not drafting Mike Gesicki's high in rookie drafts anymore. And to me, Dalton Kincaid and Luke Musgrave, Will Mallory, those are Mike Gesicki types. They're not Kyle Pitts types.
Well, that will do it for us for this episode, looking at the rookie pass catchers. But we're going to keep this rookie train going next week as we inch closer to the draft. We will embrace Mock Draft Monday and do our last pre-NFL draft rookie mock draft. It will be a 4-round Superflex tight end premium. So be curious to see where some of these tight ends land. Until then, you guys can hopefully find us and subscribe, give us a rate and review. Still working on getting some of our back catalog of shows moved over. So provide you updates when that comes. But until then, you guys have anything else to add before we get out of here for the weekend?
I'd like to say happy birthday to my wife. It's her birthday.
Hey, happy birthday, Jackie.
Hey, we just got another subscriber. All right. Well, you guys take it easy, and we will see you on Monday for our next mock draft.